Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am the host. I am back from the UK. Excited to be back. I'm very tired. The jet lag is very real today, but very excited to dive into our last Saturday show before the actual draft next week, which is kind of crazy today. I was talking with Brooke this morning about our plans for the draft, and she was like, "Oh, this is next week," and I was like, "Yeah, this is next week." So we are a few short days away from figuring out who the Chargers are going to be selecting. And we're going to have a lot of shows in between then. We're going to be coming to you live all 3 days of the draft, as we always do. Should be a ton of fun, and I can't wait to get there. And joining me, as always, is my good friend Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How are you doing this morning?
Doing very well. Brilliant strategy by Steven to take his wife to Europe before the 2025 NFL draft. So, hey, if you spend more time with me or whatever. Nah, you got that covered. Brilliant Giga Chad move there, Steven.
Yeah, so she was. I was telling her, I was like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna be streaming like Thursday, Friday, and Saturday." And she's like, "Okay, so I'll see you on Sunday." And I was like, "Yeah, like pretty much. Like, we'll go out on Saturday night or something like that and have a good time." But it worked out that way. This was the first time that Brooke and I had the same spring break. Usually we're on opposite ends of the Easter schedule there, so usually her school does the week after Easter and my school is the week before. But since Easter is so late this year, her school also did the week before. So we wanted to take full advantage. And we did that. It was a great trip and highly recommend. I don't know if I would go back to London again. It's a great city. But I feel like it's one of those things where once you see everything, you see everything. Yeah. I would absolutely go back to Scotland and absolutely recommend that anybody who is considering going to the UK put Scotland on your list. Edinburgh is one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been in, and the food was fantastic. And we weren't sure what to get, what we were going to be getting from a food perspective there. All of the food research I did basically was for London. But the food in Scotland was fantastic. And the UK in general has become such a hotspot for immigration that we had like some of the best ramen I've ever had in my life in Edinburgh, Scotland, which I never would have expected. So cannot recommend Edinburgh enough. If you are going to the UK, highly recommend putting Scotland on your list. And it was a great trip overall. But Edinburgh to me was like one of the best vacation spots we've ever been to.
Glad to hear. Happy to have you back. I did nothing for a week, basically.
Hey, you got to watch a bunch of draft prospects. I saw that you were, jumping into some like day 3 edge rushers from Oklahoma State and stuff like that. So,
oh yeah, no, I've amassed this stupid amount of knowledge of just the randomest like 430th tight end in the class, and it's just great. Everyone go watch Cole Taylor out of West Virginia. There you go.
All right, I'm gonna try to squeeze in a few more prospects this weekend. Leading into the draft, I've got some. I got 11 days of Europe trip to make up for from a podcast perspective. So, gotta get to some of these guys I need to wrap up. So, today's show, we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna be talking about our My Guys list of the 2025 NFL Draft. We've obviously talked a lot about several prospects. Tyler and I are each over 100 prospects graded at this point in time, and neither of us are grading quarterbacks. I've looked at like maybe one offensive tackle, I guess probably 2 or 3 that could be, interior offensive line guys. I haven't graded. I watched Jahad Campbell because he's awesome and fun. Yeah. But he's the only linebacker I've watched, and so getting to 100 players without doing several positions. I've only watched 2 or 3 safeties. Shout out to the defensive line class, because I feel like the bulk of that list there. But we've talked a lot about specific Chargers fits and specific guys that we really want to see with the Chargers. That's not necessarily going to be the theme of today's show. This is just generally guys that we like. And I'm going to try and talk about some guys that were not like so previously focused on. Like, I think everybody listening to this knows how I feel about Kyle Williams and Miles Frazier and Tate Ratledge and stuff like that. So I'm going to try and bring up some different guys, but what kind of process did you have for this show, Tyler?
Yeah, the same thing. Of course, there are names I can repeat. I could talk about RJ Harvey for an hour, or Trey Amos, or Trey Harris, some of these guys that I've mentioned before, but I'm trying to focus on players that we have not discussed. And generally, look, Are a lot of first round talent players good and I like them? Yeah, of course. But I'm trying to focus on, round 2 or later. I've got to try to pick like one different position. We're going to talk about 5 players each. I'm sure we can throw out some honorable mentions at the end, but just some different players, some maybe underrated players, some overlooked players. When it comes to my guys, like, yeah, sure, there are players that we all like or everybody just like likes as like a second round pick, but there are some players I think are just like, I don't know, they're underrated, and that's why they're my guys.
Yeah. And it's funny how, like, you watch a player and they become one of your guys, and then like everybody starts loving that player. Like I mentioned him earlier. I love Kyle Williams from Washington State.
Yeah.
He was one of like the first like day 3 receivers that I watched, and now he's like 50th on the consensus board,
Yeah.
and like everybody loves him. And
Yeah.
now I'm seem like I'm too low on the guy. So it's funny how the pendulum swings. And he obviously had a great Senior Bowl week, tested out of his mind. So he's earned himself a lot of money. But it's funny how you watch a guy before the Senior Bowl and then the narrative completely shifts around him. So players like him, again, we've talked a lot about him already. And it's going to be fun to see who we're going to choose here. So we're each choosing 5 players. There's at least one potential day 1 guy on my list that I don't think we've talked a ton about. But like Tyler mentioned, I'm mostly bringing up day 2, day 3 guys here to kind of, reinforce and giving us a different opportunity to talk about some different players too.
Yeah, it's a strange process. I feel like more so this year than previous years, where a lot of players that I liked that were those day 3 guys have all jumped up. When I do my big board rankings on my own, like people on my Patreon can see it, I put the ranking of where they were at the consensus board at the time, because I just want to know, like, where's this kind of guy tracking relative to where I have them ranked.
Sure.
And so someone like Ferguson, who I watch, I'm like, great, late second, done. Where's he on the consensus board? 160th. Okay, well, that's just how I feel about the player. And now I guess he is going like second or third round after his combine, after all that. So it's like Ferguson was a my guy in January, and now it's like, is kind of everyone like is like fine with Ferguson in this I mean, like the third round.
Sure.
So it's I don't have like that like ownership of that love of that player anymore. It's not like singular to me, I feel like.
Yeah, we can talk about this in some capacity, but it sounds like, according to Dane Brugler and Daniel Jeremiah, that all of the tight ends are going to go much earlier than anybody thinks. That includes Mason Taylor getting apparently legitimate first round hype, which for the life of me, I cannot understand. But every tight end is apparently going much earlier than anybody thinks. Harold Fannin in the second round, Terrence Ferguson in the second round, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to create a very interesting position for the Chargers next week, who do definitely need a tight end. But also this is that time of the year where like everybody's going earlier than you think. There's only 32 first round picks, and there's 45 players who are definitely going in the top 15. So it's this draft in particular, without legitimately good quarterbacks, it's going to be very interesting and very chaotic, I think, on draft night to see where players end up. So can't wait for it. We're going to be live every single day to have you guys covered. The Alexes will be there as well in some capacity. So we're going to have a ton of fun. Some guy bringing this up, Trey in the Discord is all in on the Mason Taylor selection at pick 22, which I cannot get behind. I can get behind him at pick 86 or whatever the Chargers are picking in third round, but 22, absolutely not. He is very much on board with Mason Taylor at pick 22. Appreciate the super chat from some guy there. And then your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man says, I can't wait for Chargers Thursdays. The season is over after the first round of the draft. So it's the nature of the beast, but a lot of people were very much unhappy with the Joe Alt selection last year. And then Joe Alt had one of the best offensive tackle rookie seasons in NFL history. So, it works out. And I'm very much guilty of this as well. Last year, we were very fortunate, and we had several guys that the Chargers liked several players that we liked that the Chargers picked. But it's not like that every year. So there's a good chance that this draft with 10 selections, the Chargers are going to take a few players that we don't like. And, it's part of the fun of being a fan on draft weekend, where you get the full pendulum of emotions, and we'll see what happens and how it unfolds.
Yeah, I loved last year's reactions to the Joe Alt pick. First of all, leading up to it, no, they're not going to take an offensive tackle. Like, Jim Harbaugh's not taking a tackle. Like, okay. I don't think you and I and Arjun, we never bet on the draft. we bet on the Chargers taking an offensive tackle at 5. Like we were fully ready for that one. And that was easy money to make there. Everyone panicked. And it was so funny then watching a few days later, people were like, now that I've watched Joe Alt, I actually think he'll be really good. I'm like, what were you doing before? like you knew it was a very strong possibility. So I don't know what happened. But yes, we are here day 2, day 3 next week to kind of just like, tell you about like it's going to be okay. And there are more than like just the first round. I am guilty though of like panicking or not loving a certain player or overhyping a certain player. I mean, I watched 3 games of Tar Heels still after they drafted him, went, and then it's like one of their best picks. So it is what it is. But I blame Minter for me being wrong.
Yeah. At least if you're going to be wrong about a player, Jesse Minter can turn that player into something that we didn't see. So it is what it is. All right, let's get into the fun of today's show again. 5 players that we just, for whatever reason, are either higher on the consensus, 5 guys that we just loved watching, 5 guys that we're big fans of, not specifically related to like Chargers fits per se.
Correct.
I think receiver is definitely a position where we could have some fun here because, Ladd McConkey creates a very specific type of necessity on the roster, but there are some really fun slot receivers in this class. I'm curious to see if any of us bring up players like that. So, Tyler, I'll let you go first here. Who is your first my guy of the 2025 draft that you want to bring up today?
Player I've watched recently. I've been doing more work on the edge rusher group, and I really enjoyed, and I think he's very underrated, Braden Swinson, the edge rusher out of LSU. He's a player that jumped on my radar because of Brett Coleman talking about like the best prospects that no one's talking about. And yeah, I think lost in the shuffle has been Swinson, possibly on our end, or at least my end, because every time we do mock drafts, I don't ever really see his name. It's always been like Jones or Robinson or some other player in that like day 2, early day 3 range. Swinson I never really saw, looked at the production, felt good, so I had to watch him. And the first game I watched of his was against South Carolina. He had 8 pressures, 3 sacks, a forced fumble, and 4 run stops. That wasn't my favorite part of the game. To me, it was watching him in coverage. They dropped him in coverage 7 times that game, and he was targeted 3 separate times, and he allowed 0 completions on those targets because he was that like solid in coverage. I'm not saying like he routed up a tight end by any means. Like he wasn't like clamping the tight end, but like dropping into zone, following a player to the flat, et cetera, et cetera. The quarterback either had to dump the ball at their feet or like throw it away because he went to his check down or his other option, and he was like covered by this edge rusher out of LSU. So I thought that was awesome. He tipped another pass, I think, that game. There's a play where he just got this insane motor and chases the quarterback for like 5, 6, 7 seconds to the sideline, forces a terrible throw for an interception. So yes, the production is there, but I think the motor was fantastic. The stuff in coverage really did surprise me. He reminds me of like if you've got the bigger versions of a Josiah Stewart or a Colin Oliver or Paolo Ryland, like I think he's like that kind of guy who plays the run like that, has that kind of motor, but he has like actual size and length in his arms. So I really did like watching Braden Swinson. I think he's an underrated player for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of a mix there because draft Twitter is, definitely not on him. But you mentioned Brett, and Trevor Sikkema actually has him at 46th on his board, which is kind of insane right now. So I first heard about him from seeing Billy M tweet about him on Twitter, and I was like, he mentioned him as like a top 50 pick for him at that point in time. I was like, man, I need to go back and watch this player. And this is after I had watched already like 20 edge rushers. But I ended up putting a grade on Braden Swinson that has him as my 5th highest edge rusher right now. So like you,
dang it, what, you're higher on them than I am. Hey, wait a minute.
But I get it. Like the coverage, the coverage ability was like, okay, this guy is crazy athletic. I watched the first game I watched was USC, and USC doesn't have the best offensive line, but in the USC game, there's a long arm, there's speed to power, there's coverage, there's looping ability, there's run defense. And I was like, okay, like I'm very in on this player. And then I watched the South Carolina tape, and it was very, very, very fun as well. So I don't know if I buy like, him being a legitimate first round prospect. Like Brett, I think took him in their collab mock draft with the NFL SE guys like at 15. if I'm
Oh
not
my
mistaken,
God.
for the Falcons. So I don't think anybody likes him as much as Brett does, but I do really
Wow.
like the player, and I think his grade it backs that up for me.
Yeah, he's 62nd on the consensus board as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13th as edge rusher, which is crazy that 62nd is 13th. Like every 5 players is an edge rusher on the consensus board. So, yeah, pretty, I think, underrated. I like their players that I like, some question marks. You really get into like that day 2 range, and maybe they don't have the same upside, although I think Swinson does. But I have fewer questions about a Swinson than I do like, well, Stewart or Michael Williams. Brett just had Matt Miller on. They discussed those edge rushers. Like they had Matt Miller on to talk about like enigmas in the draft and difficult players to discuss. And 3 of the 5 players they discussed were edge rushers. So it's like, I think everyone's starting to kind of like catch up to this whole, like the first round edge rushers is really weird, but that second group is actually really solid.
Yeah, and I think Donovan Ezraku like initially was that guy who people were like kind of elevating into the first round because of that kind of thing. But Swinson has legitimate power, and he has legitimate ability to set the edge that Ezraku does not. And so I think Swinson has a really good chance to go higher than a lot of people think. Dylan Cole pointing out that Brett took Swinson at 23 to the Packers, not at 15. So still very much higher than anybody I think has him previously. Okay, so my first one I'm going to bring up is going to be Savon Rell from Eastern Carolina, the cornerback, who the first game I watched was his 2023 Michigan tape, partly because of the injury, but partly because I was like, the Chargers obviously got, firsthand experience of watching this player, and I wanted to see how. I always like to see corners play against a run-heavy team, just because if you can't tackle as a corner, like I'm out. I'm just not a fan. And so I was like, okay, let's see what this is going to look like against Michigan. And there were so many good reps of him from a run defense perspective in that game against Michigan, where he's coming up and he's tackling Blake Corum on a toss, or he's putting his nose into a scrum and tackling Donovan Edwards. Or there was a play where he took on Colston Loveland as a puller across the formation, and he was able to stack and shed and make a tackle. The run defense was outstanding. I think he was targeted one time in that game, which is kind of a bummer that we didn't get to see him go up against Roman Wilson a whole lot. But Michigan against Eastern Carolina was like, we're just going to run the ball a shit ton, and you're not going to be able to stop us. And that's basically what they did the whole season. But then you go and you watch the few games from 2024, and I think you just see some really special ball skills, and you see some really special athleticism after the catch. And I watched him against App State, and I just had like such vivid flashbacks to Antonio Cromartie. Like Antonio Cromartie, just from an athlete standpoint, from a ball skills standpoint, he made a couple guys miss on this interception, returned it for a touchdown. And I just like, very rarely do I get like vivid flashbacks like that. But Savon Rell, if he had not torn his ACL, I think really would be a guy that would be in like top 15 contention for this specific class. He had a lot of similar vibes to like Quinyon Mitchell, where you see the athleticism, you see the ball skills, you see the high IQ, you see the tackling ability. And Quinyon still went like 21st or something like that last year to the Eagles. And Rell is just that kind of player where there's just a lot of special traits, but there's the ACL, and people are not super sure like how he's going to recover. But the film and like the athlete you see on film and the tackling ability, like it just checks so many boxes for me. So I ended up putting the same grade on Rell that I did on Will Johnson, for different reasons. Will Johnson, I think, has some like athletic concerns, and I mentioned this a few weeks ago. Just like the tape in 2024 was a little bit more inconsistent, but he also has 2023 where he was looked at as like a top 5 player in the country at that time. So I love Savon Rell. I know the Chargers have a bunch of other needs, right? And he's kind of in like the 30 to 40 range, it kind of seems like, because of the ACL. But I think had he stayed healthy last year, this is a player who would be going in the top 15. And I just loved watching him. The numbers are great. The athlete is great. The ball skills are great. He tackles, plays run defense. So he was my favorite corner that I watched this year, even though I have a couple others graded higher than him.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to ask. I've only watched him in passing, and he pops every time, so I'll have to watch him. I was dreading watching corners, but I watched Hairston recently. Obviously, Benjamin Morrison, Thomas, etc. And it's such a tricky class to break up. Like one of these or two of these guys are going to be amazing, and the other three aren't going to last a few years. Like they genuinely have that kind of like ceiling and floor to them. So where do you have Revel? I guess taking Travis Hunter out of it, where is he compared to the other corners?
So if you take Travis Hunter out, Savon Rell would be third. So I have, in that instance, I would have Barron as my CB1, and then Will Johnson and Savon Rell would be right neck and neck with each other. And I guess Johnson also has some health issues, but like we know that he's fine from the hamstring injury. We don't know that for sure with Rell from the ACL. So I would have him third behind those other two.
Gotcha. Have you watched, and you've watched Morrison? I liked watching Morrison. I just like, again, the injuries are terrifying.
Yeah, if I were just doing a film grade, Benjamin Morrison probably would be right in that same range.
Yeah.
His film is so much fun to watch, and like the physicality, the size. I mean, he's basically like a more athletic Cam Hart, I think, which Notre Dame has a very specific type, clearly. But the multiple hip injuries like terrifies me, especially at a position where you have to maintain your athleticism, and we just don't know what that's going to look like. So I have, just for full transparency, I have Barron 1, Will Johnson 2, Revell 3, Trey Amos 4, Azariah Thomas 5, and then I have Morrison, Kobe Bryant, Noel Williams, Zamaya Vaughn, Fentro, Cypress. So I haven't watched a ton of corners, but those are the ones that I have. So the top 5 I feel like pretty good about, and then I need to get more into like those day 2, day 3 corners after that.
Yeah, same. That is my job. Monday-ish, Tuesday. Got to watch some interior guys, but yes, corner I'll have to catch up on. Hairston I like too, but again, just more. Again, not a perfect player.
Yeah. Did you do a Will Johnson evaluation yet?
Yes. Really like, obviously like the previous year, that Minter year, the stuff against like Marvin Harrison Jr. That's all great. There are definitely concerns, even pre-injury, about the long speed. A little bit of grabbiness as well at the top. Like you saw Marvin. Everything underneath against Marvin was basically perfect. I don't think he lost a single rep. There was just that one. And of course, it's a perfect. It was Marvin Harrison Jr. Like that's his thing. Like you can hold him down for as long, but like he'll get the 50-yard touchdown or something at some point. Really liked him, but long speed is a concern. And watching 2024, I wasn't as impressed. And then there's the injuries. So it's not a perfect fit. Like I would worry about him for teams like 21 and 23. I'd be worried. But if I'm team 22 and I've coached Will Johnson before, I get it.
Yeah. Bolt Costa says that he has Will Johnson number 1. If you just watch 2023, I would totally get it. His work against Washington in the playoff game in particular was like, okay, this guy against Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk and these guys, like you see the high end. So it's a lesser version of this, but it kind of reminds me of like the Derek Stingley conversation, where it was like, if you just watched the season prior, you see Derek Stingley as like this top 5 player, and then there was like all this question marks, and obviously he had some health issues as well from the most recent season. But cornerback is one of those positions that you kind of just bet on the ceiling, and you try and figure it out, and hopefully you can kind of consistently hit that ceiling more in the NFL. And like you mentioned, if the Chargers drafted Will Johnson, I would be very comfortable with him hitting his ceiling. But these other teams picking in that range, I don't know, man. Like Will Johnson he's got to go to a very specific spot. And I think he has this reputation of being like a very man coverage kind of corner, but I think his best stuff is where he can play more of cover 2, more cover 3, and read and react to stuff in front of him. And so there's like 10 teams in the NFL where I think he could be his best self.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, you want to go to your next one here?
Sure. Who do I want to talk about next? All right. Death taxes and me falling in love with some like nose or defensive tackle in round 2. Whether it works out or not, we'll see. I don't think the Chargers, or at least in our mock drafts, have ever had a shot at drafting this player, but I really love Tyreek Williams, the nose tackle, defensive tackle out of Ohio State. Just an immovable boulder, 334 pounds, absolute gap crusher guy. I think is a pure just run defense guy, arguably the best guy in the draft. But I really liked, for someone who's that big, how nimble he was, very tight around turns, working wrists, like to either disengage, whatever he's got to do. Out of nowhere, he'll throw like a rip and bend, like he shouldn't be able to do at that size. So I really loved watching him. We've never had a chance to mock draft him. He's always earlier than the Chargers pick at 55. If he's there, I'd freaking love it. Even though he's not a pure pass rusher by any means, but he's well coached, decent numbers across 2 seasons for a guy that's a run defense plug. I really liked him. It would have been Jay Toia. I just think there's maybe the 2021 history of yelling at people in an elevator that basically had to push him a little bit off of the my guys list. But Jay Toia is another. It was between him or Jay Toia for me for like big interior guys that are my guys.
Yeah, Twia's a ton of fun, and we've talked about him a couple of times. But Tyreek Williams was the first defensive tackle I watched, and I was like, okay, like this guy's run defense is insanely good.
Yeah.
And he was a big reason why the Buckeyes were able to do what they did in the second half of the season, because they completely like changed their defense. Like if you watched their first game against Oregon and their second game against Oregon, you see like a completely different defense. And Tyreek was really like the main reason why he was able to do that. He does the Puna Ford thing where he can just dead leg and he'll drop to a knee and still hold off double team. So, it's funny. Like you watch players on the Chargers and how much they influence you in like what you look for in prospects. Puna Ford like has changed how I look at defensive tackle.
Yes.
And it sucks that he's not on the team anymore. But the things that he is able to do from a technique standpoint were just so high level that when it comes up with a draft prospect, you're like, okay, this is something that I know I can hang my hat on. And, he's kind of in like the 40 range too. But if the Chargers don't take defensive linemen in the first round and they wanted to go target Tyreek Williams, I would totally get it, because he would just provide that long-term anchor that they don't really have right now. And I do think there is a little bit more pass rush upside than he showed in college. Like I'm not saying that this is going to be like a 40 pressure 6 sack kind of guy right away, but I think he could be like a 20 pressures a year kind of player, and he just kind of has that 1 or 2 pressures a game for you. And I think there's definitely some ability, because he has like his burst off the football was the first thing that I was like, okay, this guy as a pass rusher could maybe win with some quickness a little bit here. So I like Tyreek Williams a lot. I have him graded very similarly to Kenneth Grant, but Grant does have, I think, more pass rush upside. So I think he gets elevated there. But Tyreek is a ton of fun. Yeah,
ton of fun player for sure.
I'm going to hit a defensive tackle then as well. I'm going to bring up Darius Alexander here from Toledo. This is a guy who, like, the conversations are very different about Darius Alexander because he is an older prospect. And so there are some media members and draft analysts who, like, if they see an older player, they're just like out. But I think from a defensive tackle standpoint, it actually kind of helps him that he is older, because he's a little bit more developed into his, NFL kind of body. He's been in college for a few years here, and yes, he played at Toledo, but the athleticism that you see on tape is just so striking to me. Like, he's able to play all across the line. In their bowl game this year, he actually had an interception and like almost returned it for a touchdown, or I think he might have returned it for a touchdown. The athletic traits are just insane. And so you see on tape this really high-end athlete, and then he goes and backs that up at the combine, where he's a 97th percentile athlete right now, 34-inch arms. He had a 80th percentile 10-yard split, 31 inches in the vertical jump, 9 feet in the broad jump, which is great for somebody who's over 300 pounds. And I just love the ability to, combine that athleticism and then win with like actual pass rush moves. Like, he will forklift you, he will chop you. Like, he did a cross chop, and I kind of was like, oh, made me stand up out of my chair. So I love Darius Alexander's tape. I think he's one of like the few players in that kind of range where I'm comfortable with him as a run defender and as a pass rusher. Like, I do have some players graded ahead of him because they're lean more pass rush. But I do think this is a guy who can play all 3 downs in the NFL, which, you have the pass rush, you have the run defense, you have the size, you have the athleticism. I don't really care about his age. And I think this is a guy who I would be very comfortable with the Chargers taking at pick 55. I think the film is fantastic. And he's a player that I really enjoyed watching.
Have not watched him. Somehow we're doing the I have not watched these players bit over here for your guys. Unfortunately, amazing when you can watch 112 people and then not know 2 of the first names that are brought up. Age, it doesn't matter a ton to me. It's a good tiebreaker. But as I'm starting to notice, and especially we noticed last year with like Jared Verse, who was like, oh, he's old, and then he won Defensive Player of the Year and murdered every offensive tackle across. like it's sometimes it goes like both ways. Like younger player like Thule has room to grow, and you can see like he's got like multiple years. And I'll talk about a 20-year-old prospect in a bit here. But then you have, you know, again, like a Jared Verse, like he just is who he is, and he's bigger and stronger than the other 21-year-olds. And so he wins immediately. Like he's already got he's already developed. So you don't have any questions about like, can he become that guy? Sure, you will hope for more of a ceiling, I suppose. So yeah, that doesn't bug me. One thing I will ask, because I'm curious kind of what you think. Brentley Weissman, friend of the show, mentioned like he just straight up wrote like Darius Alexander is not for me. You can have him. What do you think that might like? What is there other than age? And he clarified it wasn't age. What is that like turn off potentially for some people?
I mean, I don't know. I think he can play a little high at times. You know, this is not like a Deion Walker situation where Deion Walker is like always, you know, playing very high. That was like my one concern is his pad level can get a little high against double teams, but he can anchor down. Like I thought his film evaluation was one of the cleaner evaluations of the draft class. And so for me, like you see the power, you see the speed, you see the burst off the line. He can anchor, you know, yes, it's against Toledo, and I don't know, maybe that's part of the conversation for some people, you know, being a smaller school guy who's older, maybe that's just like, okay, you know, I'm not interested in that kind of prospect, but I think his film evaluation was great. He was one of the better players at the Senior Bowl. He tested like a freak. Like I think he just checks all of the boxes, and so like this is a guy who very similar to like Travis Jones, where it's like, you see the power, you see the athleticism, you see the Senior Bowl, you see the combine, and Travis Jones went in the 3rd round, you know, because he played at UConn and he's been one of the better defensive tackles in the league, you know, younger ones, I should say, over the last 2 years. So I think you throw those things out the window as much as you can and just watch the tape, see what he does. And I think to me, he's a very clean evaluation.
Okay, I will give him a watch. It's on the list of the other 4,000 people I have to watch before Thursday somehow. Hopefully they at least draft one of those guys. I'll go the opposite direction in terms of age then. I'll talk about a running back in the 2020 NFL draft. He's number 1 in pass blocking grade. He's the only running back in this class to have a pass blocking efficiency over 97. In fact, second place is Samson with 96.6. His PBE is not 97. It's not 98. It's 99.6. He allowed 1 pressure on 142 pass blocking snaps, which is the most of any player in college football in this draft, I should say, last season. Like he is out there in pass pro. I think he's a wonderful 3rd down option. He's 2nd in receiving yards in this class behind Cam Scadaboo. He's got 529 receiving yards. 20% of his snaps were in the slot or out wide. So he's an intriguing receiving option as well. He has 10 more receiving first downs than the 2nd place guy. And that's LeQuint Allen Jr. out of Syracuse. I think that at 261st on the consensus board, I think it's a bit of a joke. I understand that he's not like a big, powerful runner right now, and he's not a tackle breaker by any means. And I do have him like ranked lower because he's not like a great rushing running back right now. But everything else he provides, like you're not getting that pass pro anywhere. You're not getting the special teams value anywhere else. He's one of the best receivers in the class, or receiving backs in the class. And he's just sitting there at 261, and he won't be 21 until August. And I think that some of the stuff as a rusher, you know, you mentioned like younger guys growing into themselves, like LeQuint Allen Jr. is going to get bigger. He's going to get stronger. He won't be 21 until August. So I think as he becomes a better running back and grows into that role as a running back and is bigger and stronger in the NFL, you're suddenly going to be going, hey, this is a huge steal because this guy has developed into the rusher that we hoped he could be. So again, 3rd down, I think he's the best pure 3rd down back in the NFL or in this draft class. Yes, Henderson is amazing, but I think at least statistically, you give the nod to LeQuint Allen Jr. Receiving is amazing. Pass blocking is amazing. I can't figure out why he's at 261 unless he beat up somebody and I didn't realize it. I had a blast watching him.
Yeah, I think if the Chargers still had, you know, Kellen Moore or Joe Lombardi as offensive coordinator, this is a guy who would be a perfect like 3rd down complement in those kind of systems. As we've discussed, unfortunately, the Chargers with Greg Roman do not throw the football to running backs. But like, I watched LeQuint Allen and I was like, man, this guy is as a receiver, like legitimate receiving chops. And he's running angle routes, he's running choice routes, he's running wheel routes, he's doing everything from a receiving standpoint that you could possibly want as a third down back. There was a pass protection rep against Cal that I loved where he's on the right side of the quarterback. He takes like a fake handoff to the left, and then he goes all the way back to the right side to pick up a blitzing slot defender and just like buries the guy. So he's I would say Henderson probably is a better pass protector, but everything else, I think LeQuint Allen would I agree with you. I think he would take the cake as a third down back. So, the Chargers are in a very interesting spot from a running back perspective. Joe Ortiz was asked about this earlier this week and said that they just want like they want more playmakers, but it sounded like ideally they want somebody who can complement Najee Harris and it kind of adds something different to the room. LeQuint Allen would definitely add that.
Yeah.
You would just have to also bank in that Kamani would be able to take a step forward. So
right.
I think LeQuint Allen is better suited as like a third down back. I didn't love his like rushing tape, but as a third down back, I agree with you. I think he's the best third down back in the class.
Yeah. So if they want to still find like receiving options, like they hosted Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, like I get that one 100%. Weirdest final season in college ever with the eligibility issues. He's awesome. Montrell Johnson out of Florida. Braden Smith out of SMU, who's like kind of reminds me of James Cook, both like in play style and in like size. So yeah, I just if they don't want a pure receiving option, I'd maybe go with those.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, Thomas Martinez pointing out the UNLV game. That was a fantastic watch. I was not. I don't know what I was expecting because I think you watched LeQuint Allen before I did. His rushing tape it's fine, but his receiving tape is really where he makes his money, I think, this year.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Before we continue here, I have to tell you guys about our friends over at Prize Picks, the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. As you know, they are going to have very special opportunities for the NFL draft. The NBA playoffs are also in full swing. The NHL playoffs are about to start as well. This is a great time to be in on Prize Picks if you're a basketball fan. If you're a football fan, you can have kind of your thirst quenched a little bit by the draft this upcoming week. But it is so user friendly. I've had some coworkers who I've talked to about the podcast have gotten into Prize Picks. Obviously, this is a great opportunity for any kind of sports fan to get in on daily fantasy sports. Very easy to use. All you have to do is select 4 or 5 players, pick a statistic that you want to have them do more or less than in, and that's it. And you can win money even if you don't go 5 for 5 or 4 for 4. You can still win those lineups on a daily basis. So it is such a good treat for us to promote this app. It truly is super easy to use, very easy to win money. prizepicks.com/guilty. Code guilty is the best way to do that. It does genuinely help support our show as well. So we do really appreciate it. If you have not signed up yet, again, that is prizepicks.com/guilty. Code guilty at checkout here.
Yep. Lakers playoff basketball tonight, guys. Jump in on it.
Yeah. If you watched that Luka Doncic conversation, I think you should be picking the Lakers to go further than you might think, I think. But that's just me. So I'm going to kind of piggyback here a little bit and go with a different running back, a very different stylistic running back here. And that's Jordan James from Oregon. Despite the lack of athletic concerns or lack of athletic traits, I should say, this is a guy who finished top 10 in the class in runs of 10 yards or more. This is a guy who finished in the top 10 in the class of percentage of his carries that turned into a first down or a touchdown. Despite having, I think, only one run of 50 yards or more. Like, this is a guy who his breakaway percentage on PFF is very low. This is not going to be a guy that's going to consistently give you those opportunities, but this is a guy who is just always going to give you the 6, 7, 8 yards that you need to have a consistent and efficient rushing attack, I should say. His ability to make people miss in the hole is fantastic. His ability to get extra yards when those yards are not available to other people was just so much fun for me to watch. yeah, I did go back and watch like one 2023 tape just to see, because Dane Brugler was saying that he had Jordan James graded higher than Bucky Irving, and I was like, okay, I want to go see like what that looks like when they're on the same team together. I don't agree with that take. I love Bucky Irving, and I think Bucky offers you a little bit more juice, and he offers you a little bit more receiving upside, which we obviously saw in the NFL this past season. So Jordan James, to me, he's just so incredibly consistent, and his vision is fantastic. His ability and agility to jump cut into a different hole is fantastic. To me, he has one of the better jump cuts in this particular class. And I'm a sucker for those guys who just are consistently going to create extra yards. And in the NFL, it's so important to have running backs who can do that. So this is a guy who I don't necessarily love with like the Chargers, because Najee Harris is kind of already that. Like I want something with somebody with a little bit more juice. But if they hypothetically just wanted to have, an insurance plan for Najee Harris and make sure that they always have like efficient ground game going for them, I would understand why they would take him. Again, I want them to, get some more juice in that room. But I loved watching Jordan James. Just every run, I felt like he was consistently making people miss, consistently fighting for extra yards. And he's my kind of running back, man. Like I loved watching him play. If he were just like a little tick faster, I think he would be, like a day 2 pick. But very comfortable taking him in the 4th round. Loved watching him. Very consistent. One of my favorite running backs in this class.
Yeah, there's a few running backs in this class who just are always getting the yards that are needed of them. And sure, sometimes that could be like, oh, that's boring for some like the first or second round projected guys. But when you're starting to get into a certain range, you just want consistency at the position. So I 100% agree with Jordan James. I guess Bolt Casa has him as RB8. I haven't sorted through my running back rankings just yet, but I think like Jordan James respectably, maybe in that range, not earlier, but definitely in that range. The first thing I noticed of him was the RAS. And I'm like, great, here we go. But we all did the whole cautionary tale thing last year, where it's like Bucky Irving, whatever. And what you see, like, yes, he is not an explosive, incredible athlete by any means, but like guys like him, I don't remember his RAS, but like Khalil Mullings, these guys that just get the yards you absolutely need and don't lose, super, super crucial in the NFL. Will he be an RB1, for a long time? No, maybe he'll never be an RB1, but I think he's someone you could always rely on your team. Really good there. No fumbles on 386 attempts. A lot of guys that are, like converted from receiver to running back, like Rashard Smith, who I mentioned.
Yeah.
Have like 3-4 fumbles. Jadon Blue has 1 fumble every 30 snaps. For him to have
is it that many? That sucks.
It's
man.
Or in rushing attempts, I guess. But yes, 5 fumbles and like 138 rushing attempts. Jordan James, 0 fumbles in 386 rushing attempts. Like that's pretty good.
Yeah, that is pretty good. RB8 is definitely higher than I have him. I have him as 11. So I do think when you're grading all of these players, like you do kind of, it does kind of get to a point where to me, you have kind of like this very specific tier of Jordan James, Devin Neal, Kyle Monangai, Khalil Mullings, that kind of group where it's like, they're not bruisers, but they're guys who are just going to consistently get you those 6-7 yards. And to me, Jordan James offers like the most in that particular group. But like this running back class is so deep, and there's so many different kind of skill sets here. Like I have 10 running backs who I have legitimately like first or second round grades on. So this is a great group. And unfortunately for him, like in a normal year, he probably is like a 3rd round pick. But there's just so many guys in front of him that are a little bit more athletic, give you some more receiving upside. And the NFL is kind of turning into this, where they're looking for these running backs who can give you those 50-yard runs on a consistent basis. And so unfortunately, I just think Jordan James is not that player, but he's going to be in the league for a long time, I think, just because he's so consistent. I would imagine he can play special teams for you. So fun player for me. Yeah.
Another player, 2nd round-ish. I think it seems like where he's going to go. I hate watching 29 other players at this position, and you're just waiting to circle back to that player. And once you watch him, you go, why didn't I do this earlier? It is our thumbnail. It is Jack Bech out of TCU. I fell in love. And look, I spend a lot of time watching day 3 receivers and then go to him, and maybe that inflated how I feel. Sure. but I watched him, and it's just the NFL will overthink a player like Bech because they're going to go for somebody who's, I don't know, taller or maybe runs a faster 40 or whatever. Like it's always an overthought thing. And there's just good football players sitting right there and they don't take him. And that's him. I think he's got fantastic hands. I think his post, McConkey is also kind of like changing the way, although I liked McConkey, the way I view receivers like post catch, like just that like sixth sense, that recognition, that reaction once you catch the pass. Like how do you get upfield? How do you turn the right way to get that first down? He's extremely tough after the catch as well. You've discussed him as a Harbaugh guy, his story, of course. He's going to go after worse players because the NFL is going to overthink him. But I watched him and was like, I like everything about this player. Do I think he's elite? No. Do I like everything that he does, though? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we have kind of become suckers for these guys who do the little things really well too, and his ability to, create separation at the top of routes. Maybe it might take him a tick longer to get to that top of the route because he's not that kind of athlete. But separation in the NFL is so much more important than are you a 4-4 guy versus are you a 4-5-5 guy who can create separation. And he does that extremely well. He high points the ball extremely well. He blocks really, really well. So there's just a lot to like. Like he's very, very well rounded, and I think that's kind of becoming a theme for these players that we're talking about. So he's a ton of fun, man. If you weren't going to bring him up, I probably was going to bring him up because he's just he's physical, and I love receivers who are physical. Like it's such a difference making advantage for you in the NFL if you have a guy at receiver who will block and will fight for extra yards and just give you that extra element of physicality. Even Ladd, who's smaller, right? Like the Chargers posted the highlight tape the other day, and one of the second play they showed was him blocking in the preseason. So it just creates an extra edge for you at receiver when you have that physicality. And I don't know how I feel about the Puka, conversation that everybody is kind of throwing around. I haven't watched Puka a ton in the NFL. And I definitely did not watch him at BYU, but so I don't know. Like to me, he did kind of give me more like Robert Woods vibes, and I don't know why I was just like instantly drawn to like the Rams player, but I just think he's a guy who can give you consistently like 800 to 1,000 yards receiving, blocks, plays special teams, does all of those things well. So that was more of where my mind went, was Robert Woods instead of Puka.
Yeah, I like that. Just a good, safe player. I appreciate just good players.
Yeah, especially when there's all these older prospects and you want to take the safe players. So in that same vein, I mentioned him like early on in the process, and we haven't talked a ton about him because I do think he's not necessarily like a great scheme fit for the Chargers. But Jake Majors to me is one of the more underrated players in this class. And like, I was listening to Dane Brugler and DJ Dan Jeremiah. They were on the Athletic Show talking about like day 3 guys that they love that they think should go higher. And neither of them really mentioned Jake Majors when it came up when they were bringing up centers. They talked about Jonah Monheim, which like I don't understand personally. I did not love that tape. But you watch Jake Majors, and there's just so few mistakes made, and he's always consistently hitting the right spots, hitting the right angles, getting to his levels, getting to his spots, executing properly. His hand usage is fantastic. Yes, his arms are a little shorter, and he probably is better suited for like a wide zone kind of scheme. But I think when you watch center specifically, and we watched Corey Linsley with this, where they kind of did a little bit of different schemes with him. As long as you have everything right up here and you can get to the consistent spots, it doesn't really matter for you at center more as like it does as guard and tackle, because you're not always going to be one-on-one with a player. Like you generally almost always have help. It's more about angles and getting to the spots properly. And Jake Majors always consistently does that. This is a guy who also was a 4-year starter at Texas. He missed one start as a freshman in 2021, and then played every game in 2022, played every game in 2023, played every game in 2024. Like he has 58 total starts as a center. And I was listening to Quinn Ewers. I went back and found a clip about him. Jake Majors set all the protections. Jake Majors was the one who was consistently communicating. He was the leader of that offensive line group. And this offensive line from Texas has potentially multiple first rounders on it. There's obviously Kelvin Banks, who might be a first rounder this year. He's going to go. There's a guard in next year's class for them that could be a first rounder next year. The right tackle this year is in this class. I don't know where he's going to get drafted. Like I mentioned, I haven't watched a ton of tackle tape. But Jake Majors was the guy in that group. And leadership, smarts, consistency, durability, these are all things that matter way more at center than other positions, I think, along the offensive line. And he's probably going to be like a 5th, 6th round pick, just given his like athletic traits. But I think of the centers, this is a guy you would want to bet on. And I'm glad Thomas Martinez pointed this out. I thought his best game of the season was against Michigan. I thought he absolutely showed up against Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, had fantastic wins in both of those matchups. So to me, he checks basically every box you could possibly want, except for like arm length and athleticism. And I think that just doesn't matter as much at center. So of any interior offensive lineman that I have watched this year, if I had to choose one who I knew would get to like year 8 in the NFL as a starter, it's probably Jake Majors, just because I know that at that position, he has everything above the neck that you could possibly want. And technique wise, he doesn't lose in technique. He is always going to be in the right positions. He might get bull rushed every once in a while, but leverage, consistency, technique, leadership, all that stuff matters so much at center. And to me, that he checks all of those boxes in a big way.
Yeah, I'm glad you found the clip of him being discussed as someone who called all the protections. That's something maybe that is missed among evaluations. I don't understand why. I don't know what it is about, like, there's this weird void suddenly with interior offensive line where after you get out of this, like the top 7 guys every year, it's just kind of like I don't know. Hunter Norzad was way down on the board, and we're all like, I don't understand why he's there. I can't remember who's the center the Rams drafted. Although I think he started to move up a little bit. Yeah, those guys. Just for some reason,
he was a 6th round pick. I was like,
yeah, you got to
understand this.
Yeah, I don't know why some of these guys just fall into the void or maybe underthought. I feel like almost interior offensive line is an underthought thing.
Sure.
But yeah, he's very consistent. Obviously, as Thomas Martinez pointed out, the game against Michigan was incredible. I've only watched 3 games, so I want to throw like maybe like one more in there before I have a final grade or so. But yeah, really, really like him for sure. Sorry, not Jared Wilson, Dark Samus. I don't think that's going to be brought up today.
No, definitely the wrong show for that. And like, thank you for the super chat, and we'll get to that super chat in here in a second. But like, you know by now how we feel about Jared Wilson. Like, I respect the bit, but like, you've sent in several comments like that. Like, you know how we feel about him.
Yes, and Mason Taylor for what it's worth. Although that's more so Steven's side than mine.
Yeah. Who's your last one here, Tyler?
All right, I'm going to steal one of your players that you've mentioned before. We've got a shout out on this player before as well, and a player that I'm bummed that I waited so long to get to, Mitchell Evans out of Notre Dame. I don't understand why he is where he is, because he's better than a lot of the guys in front of him, and I think that's easy to see. Again, like Ferguson, granted, I watched Evans much later, but it was instant. Like, hey, this guy's really good. And I slap a nice grade on him, and I look at his ranking, and I go, I don't know what I'm missing. But whereas Ferguson, like, eventually they kind of moved him up. Evans has not moved at all, and I don't understand why. Because, like, even from like a casual film perspective, like, even if you're just watching him on YouTube, let's say, like, there's a lot of great, like, deep, like, seam ball stretching plays there that I think fans would fall in love with. So I don't know what it is. I think he's going to go, I don't know. The tight end class is apparently going earlier than we all think. Sure. But like, Evans definitely should. Like, at minimum, great seam stretcher, good hands, knack for catching the ball, like in stride and keeping that momentum, which I think like him, Colston Loveland, like those guys do very well. Not just like catch and go down, but like maintain whatever he has to, that momentum to keep going. Doesn't force like a ton of missed tackles. And like, if you look at the numbers for the Yak, I suppose it's not great, but like, if you look at the Yak and you compare like his per reception to everyone else's, it's not great. But when I watch him and there's like 2 to 3 more yards that he needs, I don't know what his Yak number ended up being. It's not very high, but in the instances where he needs to get more, and sometimes that's just like power, that's wiggle, that's a natural instinct, he gets those 2 to 3 more yards. If it was a difficult catch, he made every one that I saw. I don't know what his like hands, like contested catch rate, drop rate is, but watching him, I think he caught everything that was expected of him. Some not great throws from him the last couple of years from Notre Dame quarterbacks. But he's got like great like one-handed catch versus Ohio State, adjusting behind the back, etc. They move him all over. He's a pretty solid blocker. I think his PBE was like 97 or something like that. Very, very, very good player. I don't understand why he's so far down. I guess there's an injury history, says Alex.
Yeah, so he tore his ACL and MCL kind of like midway through the 2023 season. And I think you could see early on in the 2024 season that it was like working. He was working his way back into it. But if you watch the Penn State game, which was the college football playoff, so he's essentially a year and a half removed from the injury at that point. This is in January, which is crazy to me. But you watch the Penn State game, and like athletically, he looks like he is going to hold up into the NFL. He did break his foot, as Alex points out, as a freshman. He missed like 6 games that year. But he fully recovered from the ACL. I think you watched the end of the season tape last year, and it looks like how it looked early in 2023. And then he tested very well. His number one RAS comp is Pat Fryermuth from Penn State, who's been a good player in the NFL. He's definitely not been like an amazing player. The quarterback play in Pittsburgh has definitely helped out there, but he's been a low end tight end one, I would say. So I think Mitchell Evans just gives you everything you could want as like a day 2 tight end. It's kind of become like a bet on traits thing, and obviously Terrence Ferguson and those guys are more athletic than him, but this is not a player who's like this plotter type. And like, I saw some Chargers fans say they're like, oh, could be like a Will Dissly type. It's like,
no,
I love Will Dissly. He's not that type. Like Will Dissly ran like a 4.9 and his RAS score is like a 1.5 or something like that from Washington. But Mitchell Evans is the best blocker of this class, like easily the best blocker. And he gives you a lot of juice, from a vertical stem standpoint. His contested catch film, if you just were able to pull that aspect of his tape, he'll give you one-handed catches, both arms, over the shoulder catches, high point 2 hands. Like he's an awesome tight end prospect. The athletic concerns I get, I do not have him ahead of the top 2 tight ends. I don't have him ahead of Elijah Arroyo, but he's tight end 4 for me. Like he's right there with a top 60 grade. He's somebody I think should be in the second round conversation, and he's like going in the 5th round in mock drafts. I don't get it.
Yeah, so I suppose, injuries like Alex mentioned, but then as you mentioned, like the RAS was there, he tested, so it's not like it's still a lingering issue. Arguably will be better and stronger further and further from that injury as well. So yeah, I don't get it. I don't have the athletic concerns at all. I guess he's not a freak athlete, but I don't have those concerns with how he plays on the field.
Yeah, Thomas Martinez says that he's closer to Hunter Henry. I can see that. Much better blocker than Hunter Henry was, who's like solid blocker, but Pat Fryermuth with blocking, Hunter Henry with blocking, like that's a player who's going to be an effective NFL player. And obviously Notre Dame has a very strong tight end tradition. So I'm glad you brought him up because, I've been a huge fan of his. And to me, he's one of the most underrated players in this class.
Yeah, love him.
Next one here, I thought about going in a few different directions. Again, trying to be a little bit different with the players that I have kind of put my stamp on, if you will. I'm actually going to go with Elijah Badger here. To me, This is your day 3 receiver of choice. And again, from a little things perspective, very good blocker. There are several opportunities for him to kind of, fit in the run game and block safeties, linebackers. He'll do that. He'll do all the perimeter blocking. He was a special teams blocker. He returned kicks at one point in his career. And you do this wonderful list every single year of like composite rankings. And Elijah Badger is number 1 in composite rankings of all receivers in this class. So he's got, some route running concerns for me. That's why he's like a day 3 pick in my opinion. But athletically, I think he has the juice. He has the long speed. He has the blocking. Like there's a ton to like for me with Elijah Badger. And I actually really, really enjoyed watching his opportunities where he's kind of, has to track the ball and make like a different kind of catch than the route is showing because the quarterback play was not great. There were a couple instances where he's kind of running like a skinny post and then the quarterback throws it to the opposite corner. And so he has to adjust and make the catch over the opposite shoulder. So really nice ball tracking ability, great speed threat. He's got the size. I think he's like 6 foot. He is like 210 pounds. So he's got good size to him. He blocks. He's fast. He can hit that juice. He can hit the vertical stem, track the football. I don't love his like in cutting route running. Like he is kind of a little bit more limited to me in that regard. But for the Chargers, I think I really would love his complement to what they have in Lamb McConkey. I do think they should take receiver earlier than like the 4th round. But, if they wanted to go tight end, running back, defensive tackle, and you wait till round 4, he's probably the guy that I would take. So there are other receivers that I have graded higher than him.
Sure.
Let me make sure I get this right where I have him. So I have him right now as wide receiver 15. So I don't like, this is not a player that I'm like, I would take this player in the top 50, but as it pertains to like planting your flag for a day 3 guy, Elijah Badger is my choice. I think I've watched some other day 3 guys that you've mentioned. Dante Thornton, a lot of people like him for the Chargers because he's 6'5" and he runs very fast. He runs like one route and he runs that route very well, and he's very big and fast. But I do think Elijah Badger can give you a little bit more versatility as a player, while also giving you the vertical stretch. So I really liked Elijah Badger's tape. I was late to the party. I think one of the NFL SE guys like has him in the top 12 of their list as well. So I know there are people who like him, and I have more receivers to go. That's a position I need to finish. Yeah. But right now I have him as wide receiver 15, and I like his tape a lot. His athletic profile is very good, and he blocks, which is a big thing for me.
Yeah, that gets you on the field, and that gets you the trust of, say, a Justin Herbert. Those Florida guys, I'll have to, I guess, as we watch more receivers throughout the years, but like Ricky Pearsall last year had like fantastic hands and caught things wonderfully. Same thing I think with Badger as well. I like him more. Someone mentioned like Ja'Cory Brooks. Brooks is, I think, a little stiffer to me. Very good, like contested down the field stuff. And that's kind of it. Badger, I think, has better hands. More to him than that, I think. I understand the upside of Thornton Jr. Like, obviously, it's there. It's very obvious. The evaluation is very simple.
Yeah.
Like, can you get more? And that's definitely possible. And he's got good hands on his own. But Badger has like special downfield, like, trust me, I'll go get it hands.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be very important for, let's say it's the Chargers or whatever team it is, to build that trust. So I do like him quite a bit.
Yeah. He has the lowest drop percentage of this class. So he's got very, very good hands. And Benjamin Solak has pointed out that Justin Herbert likes the catch radius guys. Obviously, Mike Williams is like the catch radius guy. And I don't think he has like a huge catch radius, but the trust factor that you mentioned will be huge with the two of them, because he's I wonder where his hand size is at actually, but his hands are just fantastic to me.
I can look that up. So RAS loading. Oh, Scam Likely is calling me. 9.5-inch hands, 32-inch arms, which is pretty good. 6'1", 200. Yeah.
Mock Draftable has that as the 60th percentile for both, essentially. So not huge hands, not tremendously long arms, but 6'1", 200 pounds is what he weighed in at the combine as well.
Yeah.
His number one athletic comp on Mock Draftable is Reggie Wayne, for what it's worth.
Cool. Just next Reggie Wayne.
Oh man, Thomas says he has a recurring back injury. That sucks.
So do I. Take some Advil and get over it.
Oh man.
If you want a catch radius guy, Isaiah Nayor has 34.375-inch arms out of Nebraska. He's absolutely like 6'4", 34, and a quarter-inch arms almost. He's intriguing in that regard. I'm surprised that YouTube lovers have not found him yet.
So it looks like the back injury was more of a thing at ASU than at Florida. So that's good.
There you go. Yes, someone in our comments mentioned the same thing too.
Okay. All right. Anybody else you want to bring up here, Tyler?
I mean, I could throw out names that I like. We've discussed so many others. I guess you guys will see our big board, and I guess you'll really find out how much we really like these players. Right. But in terms of my guys, I think that's most of them. Obviously, there's RJ Harvey. Duh. I think Jordan Phillips is pretty fun. I talked about Richard Smith. Luke Lachey is fun. Twy I mentioned. I liked Jarquez Hunter a little bit. That's how you say his name. Yeah, but I think we've covered most of like my guys.
Yeah, one edge rusher I considered bringing up, who I would like the fit for the Chargers, is Kyle Kennard from South Carolina.
Yeah, he's awesome.
There's some edge rushers that I could have brought up. We talked about JT Tuimoloau for the Harbaugh guys show. I think he's a player I also really enjoy. Obviously, like Josiah Stewart.
Yeah.
Cornerback wise, I if I didn't bring up Savon Rell, I was going to bring up Kobe Bryant from Kansas. Just like stylistically, just love watching him. He's definitely has some size and athletic concerns, but he's a guy who just has like the cornerback traits that I love from a style standpoint. So he's somebody I considered bringing up as well.
Cool.
Big board that will be dropping next week at some point. Like Tyler and I mentioned, we each have some guys that we need to wrap up and add and kind of cover it out. So big board's gonna be very different this year. Like I mentioned, I have not graded any offensive tackles, one linebacker. Oh, apparently we've been saying the name wrong. Toia. Jay Toia. Okay, sorry. I should know that. Anyways. Okay, super chat time before we get out of here. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, you got me once, you're not getting me a second time, but thank you for the super chat. The last one was better than this one, so
this
one's all right. Last one was great.
Yeah, it was.
Frank wants to know, what is a position you can see us double dipping at? Let's say we use 2 of the 6s to move up and use the other 6 or 7th to double down.
Okay, wait. Oh, so they have to use it to move up, or the other 6 or 7?
I think the main thing is what position would you see us double dipping at?
Wide receiver. I think they'll need a guy, and then they'll need a special teams guy as well, or a returner.
Wide receiver is a good one. Defensive tackle, would love to see it. Although that one they don't necessarily need. It sounds like they're a little bit more optimistic about their internal room. And Daniel Popper has pointed out that they're still very high on Justin Eboigbe. So I think they should double dip. I would love to see them add a pass rusher and a future nose, or vice versa. But I could see that turning into just one selection. Receiver is good. I feel like it's probably one of those 2 positions.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at someone you can take early that they need and who plays special teams. So even tight end with Conklin now, I don't think.
Yeah.
But if they go with a 240-pound Rivaldo Fairweather later on to play special teams like Stone Smart, okay, I get that.
Wow, you're at that point of
yeah.
All right. All right.
Couldn't tell you about Abdul Carter, but I can tell you about Rivaldo Fairweather.
Yeah, I watched a few of the top guys, and then just to get dip my toes into the draft eval. So I watched Abdul Carter first. I was a freak, man. Yeah, but day 3 guys, Tyler has you covered more than I do. Dark Samus with his super chat wants to know, would Harbaugh really pass on Grant or Loveland?
Is it possible? Yes. The odds of him passing on both of those players, if they're available, is very, very low.
Yeah, there was somebody in the chat that pointed out the Pete Carroll thing. Everybody thought Pete Carroll, when he got to Seattle, was going to take Taylor Mays that year. That was his guy. They needed a safety, and then they took Earl Thomas instead. And so some people pointed out they could do that. But the thing about Kenneth Grant and Colston Loveland is that they both are tremendous fits for what they need. And they are obviously tied to them as players. So I think, the Chargers, the not taking Michigan players or taking Michigan players has been kind of a mixed bag, obviously, but it's not the worst thing in the world to take players you are familiar with. I think part of the Tareem Still thing is that Navarro Bowman was there with him last year and knew how to coach him, and he was able to give insight on him. And so the connection thing, it helps more than it hurts. If the Chargers had better options, I would be more in favor of those options. And I think I would take Derek Harmon over Kenneth Grant for their needs, but they just need more defensive tackle blue chip potential. And I think Kenneth Grant fits that. They obviously need like a long-term tight end, and Colston Loveland fits that. It sounds like both of those players have a pretty good chance of being on the board at this point, because Colston Loveland has the shoulder thing that Benjamin Albright was saying that multiple teams are concerned about. I don't think he passes on taking one of them, but that's more so just because they're both really good players at positions of need for them, more than just like being Michigan players.
Yeah, as long as Loveland's shoulder checks out, at that point, like, okay, which edge rusher that's there? Too many questions. Which corner that's there? That's a lot of questions. Are you taking, Revel, who could be awesome, over a player who will play for you instantly as well? Like, I don't think so. So, yeah, I don't think he'll pass. If they pass on both of those players and they're both there, that other player they took must freaking rock. Like, that means, which could be Derek Harmon, which I'd be absolutely in favor for. That's freaking awesome. But not only would that mean like that's a good player to them, that's a better player to them than two players they're familiar with. That means they really liked that player and loved that fit. Yeah. So I guess I'd feel good because they believe in that player that much to take someone over someone they know.
Yeah, that's a good way to point out there. But I just think, like, in terms of position of need, familiarity, like, it just checks so many boxes to take one of those guys.
Yeah, but I don't see it being Nolan Taylor. If you want to look at other defensive tackle tight ends,
sure.
I don't see it with Mason Taylor, respectfully.
Yeah. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man back here says K. Grant, Bech, Cam Scadaboo, Mitchell Evans, Kobe Bryant, Jake Majors. Sounds like a W draft, not going to lie.
That'd be a very Harbaugh draft. Kenneth Grant, Bech, Scadaboo, Evans. I could get behind that. It's going to kill some Chargers fans, but I understand the identity through that.
Yeah, identity. That's an identity draft for sure.
Yeah, which is a smart way to go about it.
Dark Samus, his other super chat here, says Tet McMillan is Mike Williams 2.0. Why draft Tet? Very different players. Very different players.
Yeah, McMillan is tall. It has some contested catch stuff. I didn't watch Mike Williams in college, so I couldn't exactly tell you from that perspective. I mean, I watched him like on TV, but not in film. McMillan, why draft him? The upside is higher than anyone else. The downside is concerning.
Yeah, the floor for Tet is the concern for me as well. I think there are like some similarities. Like Tet McMillan, from a vertical standpoint, like does a lot of the Mike Williams stuff. Like his contested catch tape is very similar in that regard. But I think with Tet, like he gives you a little bit more yak potential, and he gives you a little bit more, middle of the field potential than what Mike Williams can do in the NFL. And like I didn't watch him in college, but Mike Williams is like exclusively a boundary guy, and then he'll run like posts. Whereas Tet, like I actually really love his ability from an in-breaking standpoint, from like a drag standpoint, or shallow crossers, all that, as well as like deep in cuts. I think he's fantastic with. So I think he gives you a little bit more in-breaking stuff than Mike Williams does, and for that reason, I would classify him as like a different kind of player.
Yeah. It is strange, though, to be discussing someone like, okay, contested catch, the physicality, the in-breaking stuff, the yak, like that's all there. But then why is there so much controversy or discussion around him? It's the other like 40% of his tape that I think gives me pause.
Yeah. If I were picking in like the top 10, I would be a little bit concerned. But if he falls to the Chargers at 22, like that's potentially like a sprint the card in scenario for them, where you're getting potentially a top 10 receiver kind of pick if he hits his ceiling at pick 22. Like that's insanely good value. I have a very hard time picturing him falling past these teams that are picking in front of the Chargers. Like if he makes it to 18, like I could easily see the Seahawks taking him. If he makes it to 20 to the Broncos, I could easily see that happening. The Steelers love tall receivers who are vertical stem guys, and do they need that? But no, but could I see it happening? Yeah. Like especially with all the George Pickens like trade rumors and things like that. So I would have a very hard time seeing these other teams passing on Tet McMillan, who are in front of the Chargers. But if he makes it to 22, I would be thrilled. Like I think that's the only receiver in round one that I would like actually be on board with, because his high end is just that much higher than the rest of the other guys.
Yeah, I think the Chargers could work with him. I think the Steelers would be interesting because they tend to have head cases. Not that McMillan's a head case, but there's some concerns with like overall effort and character. But that feels very Steelers and Mike Tomlin.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Our last one here is from Kaja. I apologize here. Not super fluent in German, obviously, but she says, being from Germany, I rarely get to catch you guys live, so this was great. Always appreciate you guys and your effort. Can't wait for the draft. We get a lot of international turnout on Saturdays, I feel like.
Yeah.
You know, it's a little bit easier for our international people to catch these shows, which I always love. So very cool to hear that we have some fans in Germany, and we appreciate you for tuning in.
Yeah, it was on the Blitzkrieg Bolt podcasts with our German fans as well. The little after the Chiefs game, I think, or the Ravens game, I believe. Good people for sure.
Yeah, really appreciate that. Important clarifier from Chris. I know Jim personally visited and recruited Loveland, but did Jim go and recruit Grant too? So if this is about high school recruitment, Kenneth Grant was very much under recruited. He was, I believe, a 3-star recruit. Colson Loveland was the top tight end of his class, so a little bit different there. Jim didn't go out in the recruiting field as often, but if they were definitely in on a player like Loveland, he would go out. So as it pertains to like the visits, the Chargers did host Colson Loveland on a visit. I assume that was medical. They did not host, that we know of, Kenneth Grant on a visit, but they did host Junior Colson on a visit last year and stuff like that. So good question there from Chris.
A nice profile picture.
Yeah. Yeah. We will always shout out the Star Wars love here.
Yeah.
All right. I think that is going to do it for us today. Tyler, any final thoughts before we head out?
I'm going to turn this off and try to cram through a couple of players, some that you mentioned today, and then hopefully by Thursday get to like 125 or so. And I don't know, I'm excited for next week. Our day one draft stream is already up. We'll be there all 3 days. I can't wait for us to have the most views on day 3 because we're all just like, who the hell is that? I love watching. Yeah, round 6 is going to be legendary. I'm so excited for it.
Yeah, four picks in round 6. It's going to be a fun one for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, we are cruising towards draft day. Obviously, like Tyler mentioned, we're going to be live all 3 days. Make sure and check us out. Make sure to tell your friends. Come hang out for as long as you want. Obviously, the reactions to the actual Chargers picks are the money makers, but tune in for the whole time. We have a great time. I'm going to be eating some wings probably during the draft, so it will be a fun conversation for sure. All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you are listening to this, make sure and leave us a rating or review. Watching, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff does genuinely help continue to grow the show. This has been another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. We'll see you next time. As always, bolt up.